Well, we are joined by Fadel Kaboub, Senior Advisor, Power Shift Africa, and the President of the Global Institute for Sustainable Prosperity, joining us here on Africa Live. Fadel Kaboub, welcome to the program. Thank you for joining us. Let's get started. Professor Kaboub, you have just returned from Baku. What were some of the key discussions and your takeaways from the summit?
Well, this COP29 is supposed to be the climate finance COP. And unfortunately, instead of having the focused conversation from the beginning on the quantum, on the climate finance number, we didn't see any number from the industrialized countries, from the global north countries that have actually caused the climate crisis and have the financial, moral, and legal obligation to deliver climate finance. They waited intentionally until the very last day of the conference to finally announce a number of $250 billion, even though the draft text for the first 2 weeks kept mentioning X trillion. And then, of course, in the last minute, they deleted the trillion, changed it to the low billion of 250. And this morning, they decided to increase it a little bit to 300 billion. But let's be very clear that this number, whether it's 250 or 300 billion per year, is actually a decrease in real terms. If you adjust the numbers to inflation, the 100 billion that they promised in 2009 was not delivered until 2020 or 2022 actually, and most of which was delivered in the form of loans and economic entrapment. So take that $100 billion, adjust it to inflation, and you get, essentially less than 100 billion in real terms today. And that is completely unacceptable. The second thing that comes out of this number and this final text that we're still negotiating at this moment is the quality of finance. The quality meaning that they're talking about mobilizing money. And to explain to your viewers what mobilizing money means, it means they don't actually provide the money. Mobilizing means you find private sector solutions. In other words, multilateral development banks will do the lending, conditionalities, interest rates, and further economic entrapment and debt crisis for the global south. It means false solutions and market-based solutions like pollution permits to greenwash the emissions of the global north. All of this is simply unacceptable, and that's why the G77 and all the developing countries yesterday rejected the offer as insulting. And I suspect that the $300 billion that was just announced just a little bit ago will also be rejected. If we don't move into the trillions, then we're not serious about climate action. And here's why. Because the experts, climate finance experts from the global south, myself included, when you look at the science, when you do the calculations, we are actually owed at least $5 trillion per year in climate finance, high quality climate finance. We tried to convince the global south countries to push for the $5 trillion per year, and they decided to go with a more reasonable, kind of modest amount of 1.3 trillions based on the most basic needs for climate action and climate adaptation. So that 1.3 is a good faith down payment towards real climate action. So anything that is below the 1.3 that our countries have suggested is simply insulting.
All right, Fadel, let's talk more about this. Apart from the climate financing, what other resolutions came out of the summit? And most importantly, how do they affect Africa?
Well, Africa's priorities, just like the rest of the global south, is in terms of climate adaptation. So the text on just transition, the text on the global goal on adaptation is simply disappointing. And most importantly, the root cause of the climate crisis is fossil fuels. And that's something that also remains missing from the text. In addition to that, you see a very systematic attempt using all kinds of legal tricks to slowly water down the Paris Agreement and completely dismantle it, to dismiss the legal responsibility of the global north. You see consistent efforts to essentially move towards putting pressure on developing countries themselves to mobilize internal resources and to do their best to attract financial investments from the global north. In other words, foreign direct investment to de-risk and guarantee their profits. All of this is simply destroying the very nature of the UNFCCC process, the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. So we're really looking at potentially one of the worst COP conferences that we've seen since the beginning of this process, 29 years of inaction, essentially.
All right, Professor Fadel Kaboub, Senior Advisor, PowerShift Africa, thank you so much for your insight and analysis.